it can disrupt the family unit in the sense that attention can get really focused and really zoned in on the child that may have a disability or presenting some challenges, where the child that doesn't at times can potentially feel left out, not heard, or be completely independent to the point that they don't realize or recognize where they might have difficulties or where they could possibly feel neglected in a specific area.
Hello and welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. We're here to help you navigate life while disrupting the status quo. Our discussions cover a number of topics relevant to everyday life. We discuss everything from relationships to entrepreneurship. We also engage in some difficult but important conversations. And now, here are your hosts, Brian and Tanya Hamilton.
Hello and welcome to episode 9 of Disrupt the Everyday podcast. Today, we're joined by Tashawna Chang. She's an early learning professional who spent several years studying childhood development and the intersection of special needs. Tashawna continues to work with children and youth as a registered clinical counselor and early childhood educator while supporting the early community and their families. Today, we'll be discussing supporting the needs of children with disabilities and their families. Tashawna, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And can you share with us the role that you're in now and the role that you play to families you work with?
So right now I work for a special needs resourcing agency, and really our goal is to support childcares. And in that role, I find that supporting childcare centers and supporting children in turn support families. So just being there as an extra support, we can all use an extra hand. That would be my main role in working with families. And then as a registered clinical counselor, I find that a lot of my responsibilities are to children. And in that respect, with working with children, in turn, again, I end up working with parents.
Okay.
Excellent. So a question I have for you, and the reason why I ask this is because it's a question I would have asked especially as a young parent. You know, being someone who doesn't have kids, why should someone who is parenting, why should they listen to you? Why should they take your advice?
So this is a question that I have received. It is a question that other people have asked me as well. So no, I don't have children of my own. However, I will never discount personal experience, but then I also can't discount experiential knowledge as well as book knowledge, because I mean, both of those are very important. I have been a part of a family that has fostered for the last 10 years. I have a lot of siblings and I've worked with children for the last 5 to 6 years in a professional setting. A lot of my education is definitely parent-based. A lot of my education is definitely child-based. I have studied really hard on child development, as well as I've studied a lot on children's mental health. So with my experiences living with children, and then my experience working with children, and my experiences being integrated in very many different families and very many different dynamics, I feel that all of that put together can give me some insight and can really assist with, being an outside person looking in. Because sometimes as a parent, when you're in the thick of things and you are working so closely with your child, your child like the back of your hand, sometimes you can get so frustrated and just feel like, you've tried everything. Sometimes that outside opinion, that outside subjective advice can really help. And I find that that's what I've been able to do. So I definitely say, no, I don't have my own children, but the work that I've done and the work that I've put into it, I do feel can give me some part of an advantage.
For sure.
Now, the other thing too, you mentioned your siblings. Where do you fit in terms of the birth order?
I am the eldest and I have a 10-year gap on the second born. So I kind of fall into the might as well be parent because I've got such a large gap. So with that, I didn't really have the sibling bond where you're growing up together, but I more had I'm assisting and parenting you wherever I can, whether it be babysitting right off the bat to assisting with homework and just seeing them develop throughout their years. And by the time I was 20, I was getting another sibling. So I never really had that 2-year gap. It's always been 10 or 12, 20. So that's where I fall.
So you have a wealth of knowledge and have continued in school and just upgrading, I guess, and certificates and all that kind of stuff, which is really admirable. But what I wanted to focus on today is something I think that many families can relate to. And I wanted to talk about the impact having a child with a disability in a family, how that impacts the other siblings. Because a lot of times there's so much focus on that child who has that special need that we're not always thinking about the other children, right? So, my question for you is, how does having a child with a disability affect the family unit, in your opinion?
So I think that in general, having children can affect a family unit because every child comes with their own special challenges or their own advantages. And when you mix in different ability or disability, what that does is it can, like, as you said, draw the attention to making sure that there's modifications in your home, modifications in your school, constantly advocating. And when there are siblings in the family that don't have a disability or a different ability, I find that it's very easy for parents, families, others that are involved within your family to look at that child as being so self-sufficient because they don't have, let's say a mobile disability. So you go to that child and say, you know what, you can do that. Like you can get that on your own. Or you start to, unfortunately, you start to look at more so the disabilities of a child rather than what they can do. So then when you're seeing the other sibling that might not be struggling with the same things, their needs may go on the back burner. And working with a lot of siblings of children who, have a sibling with a disability, they're often stating that, my sibling gets all the attention, or I've just learned to do things on my own, or I try not to bother mom or try not to bother dad, or, how I'm feeling today. It's not as important because there's so much going on with my brother or my sister. And I think that it can disrupt the family unit in the sense that attention can get really focused and really zoned in on the child that may have a disability or presenting some challenges, where the child that doesn't at times can potentially feel left out, not heard, or be completely independent to the point that they don't realize or recognize where they might have difficulties or where they could possibly feel neglected in a specific area, be it social from their family, or they might end up connecting to another family, which I've experienced a lot, where a sibling has connected more so with their best friend's mom than their own, or they use that time to escape from going into a house where they might not necessarily feel as valued. So it can have some negatives. However, there are some positives where I have seen a lot of children who have gone in and they've advocated for their sibling with a special need, or they've taken on that role to really learn more about the disability and again, go into their schools and, do a lot of educating of their peers and their teachers. And so it's been good to be a part of it, but those are different ways that I've seen how the family unit can change based on having a disability.
Now, I think when we see and we look as even parents who don't have children who fall under categories with disability, and how can we be a support to other parents? What are some suggestions that you give?
So some suggestions that I use in my everyday life: standing in a grocery store line. If you're on your own and you do see that there is a parent with a child that might not be having a good time in the line. It could be a very long line. They could be struggling. Parent is struggling to keep them still, keep them together. If you have that time, just say, hey, go ahead of me. And that can be the biggest break that parent gets today because they want to get in and get out. I do that often at the post office, at the grocery store. Staring never helps. It never helps. So I just think being aware that there are some disabilities that are completely invisible. You might see a child that's screaming and you're just thinking, wow,
Mm.
like, what is that mom doing? The mom's not even doing anything. Or wow, that dad's not even paying attention to the child screaming. And we don't know necessarily what's going on in that little one's life. We have no idea how their morning was. We have no idea how tired and how frustrated that parent could be. And we also don't know if there is a behavioral strategy that they're working on where, maybe it's planned ignoring and you're thinking, well, why is nobody attending to the child? However, we have no idea that they've been given that instruction from a behavioral therapist to say, whenever they're screaming, no matter where you are, were to ignore it. So as other parents, being that support and just saying, you know what, like you're doing a great job. You've got all the patience in the world. Or, you know what, go ahead of me in line. I don't have kids, right? I don't have kids with me. You can go right ahead. I think can really be huge. I have these little fidget toys that I keep in my purse. And depending on how open the parent seems, if I notice that, maybe the child's not having the best time, now it's different with COVID, but I would give them a little fidget toy and they could have that while they're waiting in the cart or while we're waiting in line. And some parents are receptive and some parents are not. But I think if we can just have an open mind and understand that all parents are trying their best, whatever their best is, we can all just get along. We can all just support each other in the ways that we can.
That's an excellent point. And I think it applies to other areas of life as well. I think we tend to give ourselves a little bit more grace than we give others. So really taking that more empathic approach and understanding that everybody, like you said, is just kind of trying to do their best really goes a long way.
Now, can we look at back to the kids again in the family? So, what do you think siblings of children with special needs struggle with the most?
I think that that is a challenging question to answer because every child with a disability will have a different function and will present differently. I don't think that one disability has the same function or one disability has the same presentation within a family unit. If I can think of a common theme between children with siblings that have disabilities that I've experienced and been aware of, I would say maybe the top three, one would be bullying at school, where they are getting sort of that secondhand teasing for having a sibling that has a special need or a disability. The second one, potentially being, feeling left out or feeling that they have to be completely independent, not able to, you know, constantly receive that support that they need just because, sometimes attention is put again a lot on the child with a disability. And the third one, I would say the advocating part where they're constantly feeling the need to defend their sibling, and not necessarily having or wanting to invite friends into their world because they're not sure how that particular friend will be accommodating or accepting of them having a sibling that has a disability.
Now, a lot of the families that you work with, when you're talking with parents and stuff, I mean, you may see, down the board, there half of them have a good support system and the other half maybe don't, right? Like I'm just thinking about us. We live in a city where we have no family here. So even just, navigating through life on a regular day sometimes can be tricky. And then you add in the different dynamics of, okay, you need to now get your child to appointments after school every day, right? And if you don't have an extensive support system, obviously that can cause more stress, or maybe then these programs or counseling or appointments that they're supposed to get to don't actually even happen, right? So I guess my question would be support systems for the parents. How do you maybe help them find that?
Well, this plays a lot into the role that I have, which is a lot of research. So every region should have some sort of special needs resource. They should. School boards are required to have a special needs program. And that's usually the first place that I will tell parents to start. Like, check out your schools, check out your childcares, check out your local libraries, and see what resources are available and open to you that you can access. See what's free first, and then move your way down. But sometimes there are smaller agencies that are there to provide respite, that are there to provide short-term respite, long-term respite, where, you can go away for a weekend or you can have someone there when you need to go to the grocery store. Support systems are so important to, number one, self-care so that there's no burnout, but number two, so that you feel as though you're not in this alone. And I think, again, I'm not a parent, but parenting is not easy regardless of if a child has a diagnosis, a known diagnosis, an unknown diagnosis, or is completely off the radar when it comes to any special needs. Parenting is so filled with various roles, responsibilities. There's so many different emotions that go into it, and I feel that without a support system, you can feel like you're drowning. I think everyone needs a support system regardless, but going and looking into what's available, what's accessible to you, and then reaching out on things like social media. Go on Facebook, see if there are groups, see if there are chat rooms, see if there are different clubs that you can join in on. Sometimes it's going on a blog where you connect with other parents and other families that are dealing with similar things. Sometimes it's just about being heard, about knowing that someone is going through the same thing you are, to be free to ask questions. And it's in that community and it's in that support group that you can actually find access to things that you had no idea about, because sometimes there's what I like to call veterans who have raised a child all the way from 0 to 21, and they've gone through that journey. And you don't always have to invent the wheel. You can jump right on in and just see what's available to you. And I also like to say, if there's nothing that is already established, see how you can establish it on your own. If you feel that you need that support, you need someone to talk to, start a quick group on Facebook or start an Instagram page, and you'd be surprised how many people are looking for the same things that you're looking for.
I like that. I think that's helpful and beneficial, right? Because sometimes, being in a situation, you may just feel so overwhelmed with what you're dealing with every day. Even the thought of looking outside the box can be overwhelming. So I think that's a really, I think that's in depth and some good places to check out.
In terms of support, and you mentioned kids who are, who are off the radar as far as any special needs are concerned. What are some good ways for parents to support those children, while still working with the children who have special needs? What are some effective ways to really support the other children and make sure that they're not having some of these struggles that you mentioned earlier?
So I definitely believe that open communication is important. I know growing up in a Caribbean household, there are times where, the conversation can be one way. It's very important to have a two-way conversation. It's so important to know what's going on in every age group, from kindergarten, preschool, all the way up to high school, all the way up to college, and all the way up till, your child is technically considered an adult. It's recognizing the little changes. It's also going in and talking to their teacher, just having that open communication and saying, hey, just checking in, just wanting to know if you notice any changes, if you notice that, there's something that you wanted to bring to my attention. Because I know at times, you think school life is school life and home life is home life, but you can sometimes get a totally different child at home than is at school, right?
Yeah.
So I think making sure that there's open lines of communication with all partners. So that's your school, that's the doctor, that, those that are around, friends, and just making sure that, you have an open door policy for whenever the child needs to talk. Also being very transparent. So like you said, let's say we're dealing with a family that has a child that is typically developing, so no disability, and then you have a child that does have a disability. Speak to the child that does not have a disability and say, you know what? Yes, I understand that a lot of my attention goes to this, and these are the reasons why. So please know that if you come to me and I'm in a moment where I just can't be with you right now, like make a point to come back to me if I don't remember to come back to you, or if I get caught up with something else. I like to say pin it. So if there's something you really need to talk about, pin it. If I can't get to it right now, like pin it and I will come back to you. And just letting the child know that, yes, I might be busy in this moment, but I'm still here for you. It might not be the very moment that you want me to be here, but I will be here. So I think that's also very important.
I like that for us, like with having 4 kids,
Right.
especially I'm thinking at dinner time, right?
Oh yeah.
Everybody's trying to share about their day, and then it just gets crazy, and then somebody gets mad because somebody cut each other off. So I may be using pin it tonight at dinner.
Yeah, I like that.
Oh man, no, that's really helpful. Now, you said something that stood out to me at the beginning of our conversation. You said a child that has a different ability. Now, I like that. It really stuck out, because I think as a society, we just say a disability, right? Now, that can be from physical, like it just goes from one end of the spectrum to another. So, even in teaching our children and stuff like that, right? Because you could be out, you could be at the park. Oh, why is that child doing that? They're inquisitive, they ask questions.
Absolutely.
As they get older, obviously, hopefully it wouldn't be so blatant. But I think it's important for us to even share to our kids, what? They just have a different ability than you do, right? And I think that that's really neat. That really stuck out to me.
Yeah, I think it's very important that as a society, we pay attention to the things that we can do. I think it's very easy to look at limitations, but if you can look outside of those limitations and really focus in on what people can do, you'd be surprised at how much more successful a child can be when you focus on those things that they can do. So no, maybe your child can't sit still for 10 minutes like another child can. However, can your child sit still for 5 minutes? Great. In those 5 minutes that your child is sitting still, now let's build on that. Can we get from 5 minutes to 6 minutes? And let's celebrate that. So once we can start to acknowledge the things that a child can do, when we can set up successful activities and when we can set up things that are going to lead to your child winning in whatever that looks like, I find that children, number one, they gain competence, they gain excitement, their self-esteem just explodes because you know what? My mom is so excited that I sat down for 5 minutes. I'm going to push it to 6 and I'm going to work through whatever I need to work through. I'm going to regulate my body. I'm going to, have a calm body for that extra 60 seconds, whether they're shaking or tapping their foot or wanting to play with something. When we give children the ability to prove to us that they can do something that other people may have shown them as a limitation, it completely changes what they think about themselves and the things that they have more confidence to try. So that's why I prefer the term different ability rather than disability. But that again, to me, it means the same thing. It just takes it out of that limiting sphere and pays more attention to the fact that everyone has abilities, just yours might be different than mine.
Right. And I think something too that kind of arises out of that. Do you ever see this kind of prevailing idea of as another strength arising from that disability? So I'll use the example of Damon John, who's the founder of Fubu on Shark Tank. He's dyslexic, and there's as you study some of these billionaires or people who are very successful, a lot of them had to overcome dyslexia, and because they had trouble reading, they had to get strong in other areas, and you see that with all sorts. Is that something that you see in children as well?
Absolutely. It really falls for me along the lines of different methods of coping. So, for example, let's say there's a child who might struggle in one area. Could it be their emotional regulation? There might be moments where, their emotions are all over the place. They're unable to regulate in that time. But then when you find them in these moments of regulation, it's almost as if the child could be taking advantage of the fact that I can regulate my body right now and I'm going to build the most amazing, most detailed Lego structure you've ever seen in your life. And it's just so interesting to see that when we stop looking at the fact that maybe a child is having a tantrum and can't get out of it. But let's look at what happens when the child's not having a temper tantrum. What are we seeing at that time? What skills are developing at that time? What things did we not even recognize that they're able to do because we're so focused on the tantrum? So like you're saying, having to overcome certain things. It's even with somebody who has a sense that isn't functioning. So whether they've got low vision or they're hard of hearing or profoundly deaf, you'll notice that other senses are increased. So somebody who has low vision, their hearing is heightened because their other senses have to kick in and sort of, I don't want to say overcompensate, but in so many words, overcompensate for a sense that isn't necessarily functioning. So definitely agree with that.
If you could go back in time, think the Back to the Future mode, and see 12-year-old Tashawna, what advice would you have for her?
If I could give advice to 12-year-old Tashawna, I would say that it's not your job to fill in all of the gaps. However, it is your responsibility to make sure that you are doing the best that you can while still making sure that you're taking care of yourself.
So in terms of, the work that you're doing or anything that any work that you're doing outside of your day job, what can we look forward to seeing from you moving forward?
Ooh la la. Okay, so I do have a project that I've been working on. It was something that I wanted to launch in 2020. However, the climate completely changed due to COVID-19. So it is in the works. However, the launch date is to be decided just based on restrictions and all of that. You can keep your eyes out for a series of inclusion books that are coming out. Hopefully they will be done and ready before the end of this year. There's a lot of work that I'm putting into them to make sure that they are inclusive and specific and really, targets the areas that I want to target. So definitely still very focused as children as the main audience, but definitely informative enough that everyone can enjoy. Hopefully that will be done before the end of the year. So yeah, so a big project that I'm hoping to launch as soon as we can get out of this pandemic. And then, yeah, a series of children's books. So that's what is on my agenda.
That's great. I think our society definitely needs that. So we'll keep in touch. And when you have your launch date, we'll have you back on to talk about those.
Okay, awesome.
Thanks so much, Tashawna, for chatting with us today.
Thank you for having me. It was awesome.
Thanks for listening to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. For more ways to listen, connect with us on social media. To be a guest or to partner with us, check out our link tree at Disrupt the Everyday. Join us next time for more ways to disrupt the everyday. Bye.